Okay, we are going to go over agriculture, and that's going to cover Unit 5.4. There's quite a bit to do, so let's get to it. Agriculture is a big one because we are trying to feed 8 billion people, and we're trying to use the land that we have. And we use something called arable land, which is land that's capable of growing food. And so arable land is only so many kinds of biomes, mostly forests and grasslands. So we have these deforestation issues we were talking about in 5.2 and 5.17. We have changed the land itself to make it able to grow the food. While we do that, we are contaminating the groundwater. All of the pollutants, the gas, the oil, the pesticides, the fertilizers, the excess water is all starting to infiltrate and get into our groundwater and contaminate it. We have modified our crops genetically with genetically modified organisms, GMOs, to change how our food is. Maybe we're making it drought resistant. Maybe we're making our crops pest resistant or making our crops grow bigger foods or more foods. And because of that, we've seen some health effects of genetically modified organisms. A big example is wheat allergy, gluten-free people. That did not exist before, but now that we have altered our wheat, some people are allergic to this new version and they can't eat it. Another thing that's been added is this pollution. We have to use pesticides to get the bugs out of our food so we can have more food, and fertilizers to grow our food better because we're losing topsoil because we carved off the land to grow the food. There's this big cycle. The soil gets eroded as we take the food out and we harvest it. We lose more topsoil. We could get more flooding, more rain. The way we irrigate our food can cause flooding and put more salt in the soil and cause salinity problems, which affects our range of tolerance for a lot of our crops. And with the climate changing, we have to bring in more water to the places we're growing the food or move where we're growing the food to where the water now is. California used to have water. Now we don't, but we still grow a lot of food here, so we are shipping or importing in the water, and that's a problem. That's a lot. Okay, so one big thing is tilling or not tilling. So when you're doing agriculture, you're growing stuff and you have harvested your food. This food's all in these rows, and then you can either choose to churn up the stalks of the vegetable or fruit or whatever it is, and knock it down and let it go back into the soil, or you can leave it. If you leave it, the roots are still there in the soil to hold everything in place. And if you knock it down, some other stuff happens. There's pros and cons. And honestly, you could argue either side. So you need to know both sides of it. So when you till, you're knocking it down. You're knocking down the old plant. And some argue that that helps to plant the weed seed because this big rotor comes around and cuts into this soil, and whatever seeds are on these plants are going to get churned into the soil. Knocking this down is going to knock these roots out, so it's going to increase erosion and the topsoil can blow away or wash away with water or wind. A good thing with tilling is it brings oxygen into the soil. It aerates the soil by poking a hole in the ground and letting this O2 get into it. But it also can dry out the soil because we don't have this cover crop shade to keep the moisture in the ground, so it can heat the ground up and dry it out. Another thing that till can do is, while it's knocking these down, it's churning the plants back into the soil, so it could add some of the nutrients back into the ground. Good things and bad things. No till, leaving it alone. It keeps the roots in the water, so we have lots of moisture in our soil. It keeps the topsoil in place. It holds it there. It can create a nice thick organic layer, humus, and then it could make a lot of weeds grow, because there's a lot of moisture there, so you might need to increase your herbicides to get rid of your weeds before you start growing. So like I said, pros and cons to each, just be aware. Okay, another thing that farmers need to do is add fertilizer. We use fertilizer to grow our foods, to make it go faster, but there's some impacts involved with that. So this video is good. Please watch it. I hope you watch it. But in a nutshell, here's what happens with fertilizers. Fertilizers can cause water pollution. The nitrates we put in, the phosphates we put in, the potassium we put in it's not all soaked up by the plant root. There's always like too much or excess, and so it ends up getting into the groundwater and into the streams. And hopefully by now you know too much of this nutrient can lead to eutrophication and hypoxia and all the bad consequences that eutrophication can imply. Another thing that can happen is these nitrates in the nitrogen cycle end up as going back up into the air. And if they go up as NO3, they can combine with water, and then that will become acid rain. And that will become a pollution thing. And if that acid rain comes down, then the soil will become acidic. And those little microorganisms cannot survive. So they're going to die. So an acidic soil over here, look at the root difference just from one pH scale down. Look at the difference on how nice and healthy and deep the roots go to not when it's an acidic soil. Chemicals can burn the plants, and that can affect how they grow, how they produce. And you're going to get less nutrients like calcium and potassium if you're always adding nitrogen. The plant's going to take up the nitrogen, and then these other nutrients are going to get blocked, and the plant actually needs a variety of nutrients, not just nitrogen. Okay, so another thing that happens when the soil gets acidic and we've got that pH lowering, a natural element in the soil is this aluminum, and it's usually Al3+. That's from chemistry. So this aluminum is just hanging out in the soil naturally. It's just a mineral element that's in there. It's usually pretty toxic to plants, so we don't want the plant roots to take it up. And usually it's fine. It doesn't really react with water. It just hangs out in the soil and it's just there. But when acid is added to this environment, then the aluminum becomes soluble, which means it kind of dissolves in to this watery acidic substance, and it actually becomes something that the plants will take up into their roots. And the aluminum will block the nitrogens from going in because it's a bigger element than the nitrogen, and so this Al will be here and the N2 can't get in because the Al is blocking it. So what happens as a result is plant growth is restricted, and then nutrient uptake is lessened. Sorry, that got blocked. Okay, so remember, soil becomes acidic for a few reasons. The pH gets lower, that's the acid part. It could be from carbon dioxide and water making carbonic acid. It could be from nitrates with water making nitric acid, and it can be from sulfur with water and becoming sulfuric acid. So we have three kinds of acids that this could happen to. So just remember what happens when soil becomes acidic. All right, a kind of agriculture that's a very big concern is slash and burn agriculture, and I'm actually going to show this video because I think it's that important. So let's watch it and we'll talk about it on the flip side.
Hello, I'm Patrick Stewart.
How sweet.
Did you know that right now
5 minutes.
April and May are the hottest months of the year in Belize. It's a time when many farmers set fire to their land, a tradition that dates back to ancient times.
It destroys biodiversity, it destroys the soil, It can destroy crops. It can destroy communities. It's just so destructive. It's not the best way to practice agriculture.
Known as slash and burn, the fires actually make the earth fertile for a short time because plant remains fall to the ground and mix with the otherwise barren soil. But the fires also release huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We've come to Toledo in the south of Belize. The district is home to the indigenous Kichi Maya, who trace their roots back to the ancient Maya. They've kept many of their forefathers' traditions, including slash and burn agriculture. In the past, it was more sustainable because farmers only cultivated enough land to feed their families.
My ancestors knew what it was to protect nature. They knew that. They were one with nature. But as commercialization of food comes into the picture, we start making money off food. So we sacrifice all of those things like nature and sustainability to make money.
Gustavo Requena works for the non-profit organization Jacche. The NGO is working with local farmers to introduce methods that are more sustainable for our modern times.
How we reach there?
Another problem with the fires is that they often get out of control, like this one, which has spread to a neighboring field.
Our goal would not be to eliminate fires completely because it is a part of the culture and a part of the tradition. What we would want is to put in place the best practices to ensure that we protect biodiversity and other farms, because escape fires do also threaten other farms, because when a fire escapes and you have no control over it, you can damage communities and people's lives.
So alternative options are needed. Gustavo Requena and his NGO are pursuing a number of different strategies, including cocoa farming. In a protected forest area, which Jacche has the right to use, smallholder farmers are being taught how to grow organic cocoa. That gives them an income without having to damage the forest. Because the cocoa plants actually need the shade of the other trees in order to grow properly.
Here in the reserve, there are strict rules and guidelines that we abide by. For example, zero use of pesticides, chemicals, and the use of fire is controlled.
In another part of the forest, outside the protected reserve, there are plans to start growing corn and beans. Instead of slash and burn agriculture, Inga trees are making the ground here fertile. Farmer Orlando Kukul planted them 3 years ago. The tops of the trees now form a canopy overhead, and the leaves and seeds that have fallen to the ground have created a nitrogen-rich soil, as fertile as after a fire.
You can even find the mulch. There's black soil now. See, has a lot of mulch. We had restored back the soil. It's more fertile, you can see.
With help from Jacche, he plans to sow the first maize seeds in a few weeks. But first he'll cut off the tops of the trees to allow more light for the plants. The trees will grow back again later. When he used to slash and burn, the land would lie waste for years after the harvest. Now wildlife is starting to return.
First, I don't even see any more birds around, and even rabbits. And even deer, there was a visitor the other day, there was a deer here, and I'm happy they are like coming back closer, because if I was going to do burning, all the smoke or the fire going to chase so much, and even animals are afraid of fire, so they just got to run.
Gustavo Requena is hoping to convince more farmers of the benefits of these sustainable farming methods. He says it's obvious that things need to change. Here, another piece of forest has just been burned to the ground.
Bananas. Of course, I do feel saddened when I look at it, but I also feel proud, because it shows that if I don't do it, and if my organization doesn't do it, if my colleagues don't do it, then who else is going to do it? So it gives me a sense of pride to know that we are doing the right thing.
Okay, so that is slash and burn agriculture. So the points are the first burn, you get a lot of nutrients from the ash of all of the ingredients that were in these plants to begin with, but it's unsustainable because after a season of growing, the nutrients are gone and there's no way to put them back in. And now we're left with this, which is going to be a lot of erosion when it rains, which it's going to, it's the rainforest. And now we have no plants to capture all the carbon dioxide, so we're going to have increased temperatures, global warming, climate change because of that. So there's a lot of things that are some problems with the slash and burn. Okay, palm oil. This is my little soapbox. Anything that you see up here, any of these words, is palm oil. And palm oil is the #1 destroyer of rainforests. So a lot of our products that we have contain palm oil. It's cheap, and it's easy to get, and you don't have to pay a lot. Oreos, I know, were a really big offender, and a couple years ago, people came down on Oreo, and they've actually taken the palm oil out. So Oreos are okay now. But you can check any of these words: vegetable oil, vegetable fat, palm kernel oil, palm fruit oil, palmate, palmitate, palmolane. All those are fancy words for, oh my gosh, palm oil. And you can see a lot of these have the word palm in them. So there's some websites you can go on to check, but my plea is if it has palm oil, then boycott it. So my little hope is that we boycott palm oil. Even if it's your favorite snack ever in the whole world, you can write to the company and say, hey, stop using palm oil, please. Okay, so just be aware that's slash and burn agriculture. It's also slash and it's just cash crops. They've just replaced whatever naturally grows there for just palms to harvest their oil, to sell to big companies, to use cheaply to give us our crummy food that has no nutrients. That's kind of how it goes. Okay, this is how palm oil looks. Lovely. It's going in your belly. This is a good video to watch, like all of the process, but I won't make you watch it right now, but you probably should. So I'll put the link to this PowerPoint so you can watch the videos that it's contained inside. Okay, the rainforest actually gives us hundreds of products. We get my favorite one, chocolate, coconuts, bananas, we have the cute monkeys, we get wicker baskets, we get rubber from actual rubber trees, the cola nut for my Diet Coke, a lot of nuts, a lot of teas, a lot of things, sugars, cinnamon, all these things come from rainforest. Vanilla, we have to put vanilla in all of our baking. So we need to protect them. Not only do they have all these wonderful foods, there's a lot of medicines contained in the rainforest. And when I was taking this class as a graduate student, we thought maybe even the cure of cancer was there, or maybe it's already been burned down because the rainforests are destroyed a football field at a time, like in a matter of hours. It's ridiculous. Okay, so why are we destroying all these rainforests? Lots of reasons. Population's growing. 8 billion people have to live somewhere. Poverty. People need to make money, and if they can get a cash crop instead of having these forests for wildlife to live in, then that's what they're going to do. The governments do it for their economy too, for their money. Cattle grazing is taking the place of growing other types of food. So you need to put your cows somewhere and raise them somewhere. And so clearing off a rainforest and growing food for the cow on another field is pretty lucrative. McDonald's got nailed for that a few years ago and they stopped buying rainforest beef. They actually buy local beef now. The wood, the lumber is expensive. We were talking about how expensive wood is. These are hardwoods. They're fancy, they look cool, they last a long time, and they're very expensive, and the people will pay top dollar for them. So why not grow them, slash them, and grow them some more? Soybeans have become huge. They can be a fuel, they can be a food, and they can be multi-used, and they're fast and easy to grow. They're not great for the soil. That's why you have to clear out more property for a new plot of soybean fields every so often. We talked about the palm oil, just all the cash crops, the coffee, the banana, the chocolate, etc., etc. Banana. So here's your unfun fact. Tropical forest fires account for 17% of all the carbon dioxide emissions that humans make, twice as much of all the car and truck emissions. So burning the tropical rainforest is a huge, huge impactful thing that happens. Okay, this one we are going to watch. Please stay with me. This is a big deal.
In the last couple of years, we made Wix websites way faster, achieving dramatic improvements for co-web.
And in South America tonight, an environmental problem of a much greater magnitude. The destruction
of the Amazon rainforest.
A worldwide disaster.
In the 1980s, the world learned that the Amazon was in danger.
Trees are falling at a startling rate. 77,000 square miles of
An area twice the size of Belgium.
the size of New York State.
The size of California disappears.
And why it was so important to save it.
1/5
The oxygen we breathe.
20% of
world's fresh water.
half of the species of life on Earth is in these forests.
Is an ecosystem the entire world needs for its survival.
By the 1990s, it seemed like it was too late.
The destruction accelerates.
More than twice as fast as previously believed.
Virtually impossible to control.
Once it is gone forever.
Then something changed.
The annual destruction rate of the Amazon rainforest has dropped
By 70%, the lowest rate of deforestation since records began.
The Amazon could achieve the end of deforestation, a huge accomplishment.
But in order to keep it safe, there was one condition.
Protecting the forest is a continual process. Brazil will need to stay vigilant.
But it didn't.
The Amazon is burning. Consumed by fire.
Fires have been raging.
Thousands of fires are blazing. More and more trees are cut down.
Deforestation of the Amazon rainforest hit its highest rate in a decade.
Today, the Amazon is being destroyed all over again. The question is, can it be saved this time?
Okay, so that's kind of the preview of that video. I encourage you to watch the whole thing. It's got some good facts in it, and what's going on politically is pretty important. Brazil just got a new president, which is an old president, and we'll see his stance on saving the rainforest or not, and see what that's gonna pan out to do. Okay, so the Amazon is mostly in Brazil. Here's a little satellite view of it. Some consequences of burning it down: we lose habitat destruction. We lose that carbon sink. A way to store carbon dioxide is gone when the plants are gone. So that will increase our temperatures, causing this climate change. We will get more air pollution from the burning of the forest. It'll put particulates and chemicals up into the air like carbon dioxide, nitrates, and sulfates, causing acid rain to come back down. Because the plants aren't there, we're going to have eroded soil, and that soil is going to wash into the waterways and contaminate the water. And again, we might lose some very valuable medicinal plants in the burning. Okay, I think we did it. I know it's really long, I'm sorry, but it was important we get into that, and hopefully you can understand the beginnings of agriculture, why we need it, the food we need to grow, the things that are involved with it, and some consequences because we need to do so. All right, we'll see you on the next one.